My wife, Emma, presented me with the divorce papers 6 months prior. I believed at the time that our relationship was strong and unbreakable. We were that pair, in my opinion, and we had been married for a year after being together for 4. The kind that caused other folks to scoff. The kind that took turns, surprised each other with small presents, and shared anniversary tributes on Instagram. I felt like the luckiest guy alive because of her thoughtfulness. She would make my favorite homemade lasagna from scratch without asking whether I had a rough day at work. A pair of gloves would be waiting for me the next morning if I casually remarked that I wanted a new pair. It was also not biased. She never had to worry about anything because of me. Bills covered. Date evenings always organized. Presents for an anniversary well-timed and thoughtful. I used to believe others when they said that we were relationship objectives. Then, though, things became strange. Initially, it was only minor issues. I couldn't explain the small, nearly imperceptible changes that made my stomach turn. Since I worked in finance, Emma had never given much thought to money and always left it to me. But now she wanted to know every little detail. Hey, maybe we should start saving for a house, is not the typical conversation I'm referring to. I'm talking about going in depth with my investment accounts, savings from before we were even married, and my grandparents' inheritance. I poured us some wine, and she prepared pasta while we sat at the dinner table one evening. It was just another Tuesday. Suddenly, as if to inquire about the weather, she looked up and twirled her fork in her spaghetti and said, "So, how exactly is your inheritance stored?" I blinked. "Halfway to my mouth is the fork." "What?" She gave a casual shrug. "You know, is it in one account? Or investments? Trusts?" My chest constricted in some way when she spoke it. This question wasn't typical. Not from her. "Why do you suddenly care about that?" I responded. She laughed a little, but it seemed strange. "I just think I should know these things. We're married, after all," I observed her. Despite the lightness of her tone, there was a planned undertone. I explained the fundamentals to her. The majority was in long-term investments, with some in equities and some in real estate. "Nothing very noteworthy." Too nonchalantly, she said, "And you're the only one with access to it?" What a strange question. I nodded while closely observing her. "Yeah, it's my inheritance, Emma." She nodded, spun her noodles once more, and then abruptly shifted the conversation to a new downtown coffee shop. That should have been the end of it. However, it didn't. I discovered she had been answering a lot of calls in private a few days later. I dismissed it at first. We weren't the type of couple who constantly bothered with each other's affairs. However, I heard her phone vibrating on the kitchen counter one evening. As I was watching the game on the couch, she noticed the caller ID while she was washing a dish. Without any delay, she picked up the phone, wiped her hands, and entered the bedroom, gently shutting the door behind her. She wasn't like that. Emma had never before kept her phone a secret. She would constantly take calls in front of me. Hell, while cooking, she would occasionally even put folks on speaker. Now, though, she was now leaving, shutting doors. I initially persuaded myself that I was being overly suspicious. Then I began to notice other things, though. All of a sudden, she was working late. Emma worked overtime since she was a project manager at a software company. Before, though, it might have happened once a month, 2 or 3 times a week now. And the most peculiar aspect? She had stopped using our joint credit card to pay for dinner. There used to be a fee for takeout or a cafe stop whenever she worked late. Now, though, nothing. Therefore, something wasn't adding up, unless she was eating her own packed lunches for 6 hours in a row. Then I mentioned it in passing one evening when we were brushing our teeth. "Hey, I noticed you've been checking our bank accounts a lot lately. Is everything okay?" She stopped. For a split second, that is. I could have missed it if I hadn't been observing her image in the mirror. Then she made herself chuckle. "Oh yeah, just trying to be more responsible. You know, I figured I should start keeping track of things better. She grinned. However, it missed her eyes. You sure? I spit out my toothpaste as I inquired. Yeah, of course. It's nothing, babe. Just me being proactive. I wish to trust her. God, I wanted to think she was real. However, I have enough experience in the financial industry to realize that when someone suddenly becomes very interested in assets and accounts, something is wrong. It's similar to when customers begin to inquire about their investments in strangely detailed ways. They are almost always planning something. And the more I focused, the more I noticed that things didn't add up. She became strangely silent whenever I discussed my goals for the future. For our second anniversary, we had planned to take a large, all-inclusive trip to Mexico that would only be for the two of us. We had spent months discussing it. Now, though, she would always bring it up and then change the topic. Hey, I was looking at flights for our trip. Oh, remind me later, okay? I'm swamped with work right now. Or, should we book the hotel this weekend? Let's hold off for a bit. Things are kind of crazy at work. It was more than just the journey. We were watching TV one evening when a commercial for a baby product aired. I gave her a playful shove. Maybe we should start thinking about this soon. She hardly gave me a glance. Oh, yeah, maybe. She then reached for the remote control and switched the channel. I became aware that something had shifted at that point. Emma was separating herself, not simply slipping away. From me, from our plans, from our existence. What's the worst? I didn't know why. I was going to find out, though. When did I do it? It was even worse than I had anticipated. The problem with gut instincts is that you can dismiss them, justify them, or convince yourself that you're overanalyzing them. At the end of the day, though, they remain. When everything seems normal, they are there, nibbling at you and whispering in the back of your mind. Emma was someone I wanted to believe. Yes, I did. However, my intuition didn't agree, so I began to listen. I wasn't even sure what I was searching for at first. Just little things, minor discrepancies. The fact that she felt the need to know my precise work schedule, minute by minute. When we were together, she seemed to be constantly checking the time, as if she had somewhere else to be. The way she began to pose such strange queries. We were in bed one night when the room was dark, and the only sound was the ceiling fan. She started talking while I was half asleep. Hey, how exactly does your 401 key work? I opened my eyes. What? Like, if something happened to you, who gets it? Her voice sounded tense, but she tried to sound nonchalant. I glanced in her direction. Why are you asking me that? Without looking at me, she shrugged. Just thinking about the future, in case life throws something unexpected at us. She stated it in a way that made my skin crawl. My thoughts were racing as I gazed at the ceiling. I might have overreacted. Perhaps this was simply standard financial planning. Perhaps she was simply acting responsibly. But I knew better in my heart. Since I worked in finance, I was aware. I had previously observed this pattern in clients rather than marriages. Those who inquire about accounts, access, and liquidation penalties out of the blue. Almost every time, they had a plan. I simply had no idea what it was. Still, I discovered her lying a few weeks later. Wednesday was the day. At approximately 5:00 p.m., Emma texted me, working late. Don't wait up for dinner. All right. Typical. However, on the way home, perhaps an hour later, I made a stop at our regular grocery store. And you know who I spotted getting into a car that wasn't hers in the parking lot? Emma. And not merely stepping into the vehicle. I'm laughing. She tossed her hair, bending slightly too near to the driver. I went cold. My intellect briefly attempted to defend it. It might be a colleague. Perhaps she got a lift home. Perhaps the driver, a man I had never seen before. then came over and touched her thigh. My stomach dropped. She failed to notice me. I didn't even consider looking around. She simply let him touch her, smiled, and closed the door. I felt foolish as I stood there with the grocery bag in my hand as the automobile pulled away. The drive home is not anything I recall. I don't recall opening the door. I do recall sitting at the kitchen table with my head spinning while I stared at my phone. I could have given her a call. I had the option to text. A passive-aggressive message like "I hope work wasn't too hard tonight" is what I could have sent. However, I didn't. Rather, I fulfilled my obligation from weeks ago. I began to defend myself. I was in my office that night opening a private bank account, while Emma was working late. Nothing sleazy like that, nor to hide money, merely to ensure the safety of my personal wealth and inheritance. I then began reviewing our joint finances, examining spending trends, monitoring withdrawals. And when I tell you that the warning signs began to appear, man, numerous minor trades, never more than $100. Not too much to cause suspicion. Numerous cash withdrawals. There were the transfers after that. Regular ones, not giants. Small funds are being transferred into her personal account from our joint account. Here's 100. There are 200. It wasn't sufficient to ruin our finances. However, it was plenty to convince me that Emma wasn't merely deceiving me. Rather, she was getting ready for something. And whatever it was, I had to be prepared. I did something the next day that made me feel like the world's worst spouse. I began recording everything, every significant acquisition, any cost that is shared, all the properties we owned together. I took pictures of assets all over the house, especially the gifts she had given me. I didn't intend to do anything with them, but I had a gut feeling that I would require ownership documentation in the future. I then reviewed all of our financial documents. That's when I discovered it. An additional credit card. We didn't share one. We hadn't discussed it. Just a month ago, an entirely different account was opened in her name. As I gazed at the TV, my heart was racing. Why? Why would she require a credit card that is hidden? At eateries I had never heard of, there were fees. Stays at hotels. There were no gas outlets close to her place of employment. Then there was a charge that gave me a sick feeling, a divorce lawyer's retainer fee. My ears were ringing as I sat there and stared at the transaction. It was taking place. She intended to abandon me. She wasn't simply walking away, though. On the way out, she was making sure she had everything she needed. I was ill. Not because I should have been heartbroken, but I wasn't. However, the woman I had trusted and loved wasn't simply ending our marriage. She was attempting to defraud me. I wasn't going to allow that to occur. During that evening, I played stupid. 2 hours after Emma promised to come home, I didn't mention what I had discovered. I simply gave her a cheek kiss, inquired about her exhausting workday, and watched her deceive me. And something hardened inside me as I watched her. I wasn't going to do anything except watch this unfold. If she felt like being shady, I would be prepared. And when did it happen? She would undoubtedly regret each and every choice that brought her to this point. Betrayal has the drawback of not striking all at once. It occurs in waves. You convince yourself it's all in your head, and you're all right for a moment. The following one? As you look at bank statements and discover that the person you've spent your entire life with has been a long-term scammer, you're following lies like a private investigator. I didn't get any sleep that evening. Emma slept next to me, curled up like she didn't give a damn, while I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The boldness, the sheer foolishness of it all. I was aware that she intended to leave me. I was aware that she had a lawyer. I was aware that she was transferring funds to her personal account. She was still here, though. I'm still getting goodnight kisses. We continued to act as if nothing was wrong. I desired to rouse her. I wanted to know why. the reason behind her actions, why she was unable to be straightforward. However, I already knew the response, because she wouldn't receive what she desired if she were honest. She had no desire to go and start afresh. On the way out, she wanted to take as much as she could. I rolled over, my mouth clenched as I stared at the wall. Okay, if she thought this was a game, I would then play. I began implementing my strategy the following morning. I called my lawyer first. Another one, a shark, not just any divorce lawyer, the sort of man who did more than merely deal with divorces. They were his. I told him everything. The credit card is hidden, the withdrawals, the inquiries concerning my inheritance. He whistled softly when I finished. He remarked, "She's planning something big. You need to move carefully." "That's the plan," I whispered. "First things first," he added. "Make sure she can't access any of your individual assets. Anything in your name, only lock it down, completed already. Second, do not let her know you're onto her. If she thinks you're clueless, she'll slip up. That would be more difficult, acting as if I wasn't gradually exposing all of her lies, maintaining a neutral expression whenever she spoke us, and our future." I tightened my hold on the phone. "I can handle it." Then the most crucial part arrived. "If she serves you papers first, she controls the narrative," warned him. "You need to get ahead of this." That meant something to me. I had to be the first to file because of this. I had to be the one to establish the conditions. She needed to be outplayed by me. I led 2 different lives for the following 2 weeks. I was the spouse I had always been to Emma. I made supper at night, as if nothing were wrong, sent her amusing memes during the day, and bid her farewell with a kiss in the morning. However, behind the scenes, I was getting ready for battle. I transferred my inheritance into a safe, untouchable trust. I collected all financial records, including bank accounts, investment records, and tax returns that demonstrated my assets before marriage. After that, I began to observe her motions. She believed she was being cunning. She believed I wasn't observing. However, I was. I noticed that she was using her phone more frequently and taking calls that were unquestionably unrelated to her job. I observed that she began to vanish on the weekends. Even the abrupt addition of a second gym bag to her automobile caught my attention. She had more in mind than simply abandoning me. She was getting ready to move in with another person. And that, more than anything else, that infuriated me. Then I received my confirmation one evening. It was nearly midnight. Emma slept next to me, breathing steadily and slowly. On the nightstand, her phone was charging. I wouldn't touch it normally. I was still hesitant. However, my instinct urged me to check. So I did. That's when I noticed it. Sarah Work is a stored contact that sent the text. However, it wasn't Sarah from the office. He was the one. "Christopher, can't wait to see you this weekend. Love you." My blood froze. It was there. The evidence. The icing on the cake. She wasn't simply abandoning me. She was unfaithful to me. And she was financing her little romance with our money. I carefully put the phone down. In the dark, they sat. Give it time to sink in. Then, I grinned. Because right now, I wasn't just going to get a divorce initially, though. I intended to ruin her. I didn't get any sleep that evening. As if nothing were wrong, I sat in bed, gazing at the ceiling and listening to Emma breathe next to me. As if she wasn't skulking around with a different guy. As if she wasn't surreptitiously depleting our accounts in order to plot her getaway. As if the life we had created together hadn't been totally upended by her. With my hands clutching the covers, I clenched my jaw. She believed she was very intelligent. She believed she was winning. However, what about being dishonest? When someone plays smarter, you'd best be prepared. I was, too. I gave her a forehead kiss the following morning before heading off to work. To make the fib seem more convincing, I even brought her coffee. I needed her to be at ease. I needed her to believe that I was exactly where she desired me to be. And I was making advances while she was busy feigning to be my devoted wife. First stop, my attorney. I gave him the evidence of her affair, the withdrawals, and the proof of her secret credit card. He whistled softly when he noticed the texts. Damn, she's really going for the full betrayal package, huh? I let out a breath through my nose. Can we use this? He grinned. Oh, we're not just using it. We're burying her with it. You see, most people are unaware of this. But in some states, divorce settlements are impacted by cheating. And fortunate for me, one of those states was where we lived. Emma was therefore not just receiving a clean break. Nothing was coming to her. No alimony. Not even half of my resources. Nothing. She earned it. The documents were being drafted by the time I arrived home that evening. Emma was humming while preparing dinner in the kitchen, as if she hadn't just told a man she loved him a day earlier. I had to fight the urge to chuckle. Rather, I approached her from behind, put my arms around her waist, and gave her a cheek kiss. A whisper. Smells good, I said. Leaning in close to me, she said, Thanks, babe. Thought I'd make your favorite. The audacity, God. I nearly felt sorry for what was about to happen. Nearly. I tied up all the loose ends throughout the course of the following several days. My private account is now where I keep my direct deposits. I canceled all of our shared credit cards for her. I reviewed my inheritance trust one more time. I then took one final action. I bided my time till her next late night at work. She wasn't going to work. As I already knew, I decided to follow her. I made no effort to conceal it. I hoped she would see me. I wanted her to be aware that she was apprehended. She was indeed there, coming into the parking lot of a budget motel. Outside of room 214, he was waiting for her. She grinned and flipped her hair like a teenage girl in love as she got out of the car. And right before she got to him, I rolled my window down. Have fun at work, sweetheart. The way her whole body became cold, priceless. She spun around, her face pallid and her eyes wild. Mark. One stopped her in her tracks. After giving her a final glance, I placed my car in drive and left. I didn't have anything more to say. She was aware. And when she arrived at her house, she would have greater knowledge, because there was a manila package waiting for her on the kitchen counter. The divorce decree. Filed, signed, and entirely to my advantage. When she returned home that evening, I wasn't there. I wanted her to feel that oppressive weight in her chest when she entered that vacant house and saw the manila envelope on the counter. I had been bearing the same burden for months. I wanted her to understand that I had already done it before her. She was seated at the kitchen table with the divorce papers spread out in front of her when I entered the room. Her knuckles were white, and her hands were balled into fists. Her eyes were wild as she glanced up at me. What the hell is this? Calmly, I put my keys down. It's exactly what it looks like. She pushed the documents in my direction and said, You're divorcing me? I chuckled. I was unable to resist. You were already divorcing me, Emma. You just weren't expecting me to file first. Her jaw dropped, closed after that. She was at a loss for words, since she was aware they had caught her. I leaned back in my chair and took a seat across from her. You should probably read through that carefully, I replied. There might be a few surprises in there. She snatched up the papers and flipped through them frantically until she reached the assets section. Her face broke at that moment. Wait, she gasped as she turned the page back. I don't get, with a hint of panic in her voice. She glanced up at me. Mark, what the hell is this? Why am I not getting? I grinned. Oh, that's just the part where you get nothing. Her whole body froze. That is unfair, she yelled. We built a life together. I deserve. The words you deserve nothing, I said icily. And that's exactly what you're getting. She began to shake her head while looking through the documents, as if she would discover a gap. However, she refused. Considering that I ensured it, Was she unfaithful? Recorded. Her covert financial activities? Followed. Does she try to deplete our accounts? Exposed. In our state too? In other words, she left with nothing. No alimony. Not even half of my savings. Just whatever she had in her own account, which wasn't much given that she had been financing her affair with my money. I rested my arms on the table and leaned forward. I remarked in a low voice, "You thought you were so smart, sneaking around, moving money, hiring a lawyer behind my back." Her breathing had become erratic. "Mark, please, no," I responded, interrupting her. "You made your bed. Now you can lie in it." Tears filled her eyes as she gazed at me. She muttered, "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I cocked my head. "You didn't mean for what to happen? The affair? The lies? The part where you tried to screw me over while smiling in my face?" Her hands trembled as she gripped the divorce papers. Looking down, I briefly pondered whether she would eventually come clean, whether she would at last take responsibility for her actions. Rather, she wiped her eyes, sniffed, and muttered, "Can we just talk about this?" It nearly made me chuckle. "We're way past talking, Emma." I got to my feet, signed the papers. She took a deep breath. "And if I don't?" I gave a shrug. I leaned in a little and said, "Then we go to court. And trust me, you don't want that. Because if we do, I'll make sure every single detail about your affair, your lies, and your financial games, all of it comes out in front of a judge." She winced, since she was aware. She was aware of her defeat. I looked at her one last time, signed them. Then, leaving her there with the consequences of her own decisions, I left the kitchen. The documents were signed 3 days later. It was over in an instant. A week later, she moved out, stole her laptop, her clothes, and what little dignity she still had. And me? I went on. Don't turn around. No regrets. I made a new acquaintance a few months later. Julia was her name. She was witty, friendly, and completely different from Emma. I told her what had happened, and she simply shook her head, smiled, and said, "Damn, you really dodged a bullet, huh?" I chuckled. "Yeah, I really did. And for a long time, the first time, in fact, I felt liberated.